Hey everybody, thank you so much for joining the Rock and Metal Guardian today. Hope you're doing well wherever you may find yourselves. I'm Dane, your host. So today I want to talk with you about the concept of what is classic rock. This is a topic that's been contested for a long time now, and I thought that I would like to talk about this as well. And there are a lot of articles out there, and no one can agree on what the definition of what classic rock is. Some articles even contradict themselves within the same article. Now, I'm not here to give a definitive answer. There is no definitive answer. I just thought I'd like to weigh in and give my opinion. And, of course, I'd like to hear your opinions in the comment section below, what your take on this debate is. Now, I have not thought about this topic in a while, but it's always been in the back of my mind for some reason. And I was on Twitter for about a hot month, and I haven't been on Twitter in like 4 or 5 months now. But I was on Twitter for a brief moment, and I got tired and bored of it. It's also kind of toxic now, and so I remember following a feed called Classic Rock in Pictures, and I remember being excited about that and I remember there's just some great pictures of classic rock photos of the band and band members that I was like, wow, these are great. I wish I had these, right? Like in a portfolio or something. So we're talking Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, Black Sabbath, Uriah Heep, Fairport Convention, Peter Gabriel, David Bowie, Iggy Pop, that kind of thing, right? And then one day I come home, and that was how I would come home from work and unwind, was to get on Twitter for about 20 minutes and then go do my thing, something else. And then one day, lo and behold, I see photos of REM and U2 and thinking, okay, that's not classic rock to me. So again, I'm not here to give a definitive answer. There is none, but just to weigh in, as I said, and I'd love to hear you weigh in as well, as I said in the comments below. So there are 4 different perspectives on what classic rock is. What's the definition? There may be others, but these are the 4 from my research. One is classic rock is defined as an era, or i.e. time period. 2, it's it's a general, not specific style or sound. So one more time, it's a general, not specific style or sound. 3, it's a group of subgenres with similar vibes, moods, atmospheres, textures, sounds, etc. And finally, number 4, it's a radio format, that album-oriented rock we get from the late 60s, early 70s. Now, let's also, before we dive into what I believe it is and why, with the explanations, I want to talk about the word itself, classic. This is defined as judged over a period of time to be the highest quality and outstanding of its kind. Translation, excellent. So by that word alone, you're arguing that anything, as long as it's excellent, can be classic rock. And I have issues with that. So for example, if you take, trying to think of something. So if you take Cirith Ungol's new album, which I think is excellent, Dark Parade, you're telling me that's lumped in with classic rock? I don't think that should qualify to my way of thinking. But I'll get into more of that. And another definition of classic is remarkably typical. And I put a question mark next to that because that's just way too vague. We know remarkably means excellent, right? But typical, are we saying similar? We're back to similar style, texture, sound, that sort of thing. Okay. Now, my opinion is that classic rock is an era, a time period, not a genre. So here's why. Number 1, there are too many subgenres, much of which is too far removed from what we see as rock music or hear as rock music. While some of the examples I'm going to give you of some of these subgenres that I don't think qualify as classic rock, while they may have some of the similar sounds and textures, to me there isn't enough of that. So here are some of the many subgenres that I think are too far removed to be qualified as classic rock. Grunge, post-punk, new wave, no wave, industrial, doom metal, gent, jazz fusion, alternative. Yes, people have argued that jazz fusion is classic rock. Alternative to what? Indie, art punk, gothic, death rock, doom metal, stoner metal. Those are the ones that come to mind the most. There are others. Now here are subgenres of rock that I think do qualify as classic rock. Rock and roll, pop rock, hard rock, proto-metal, progressive rock, progressive hard rock, some punk, let's see, southern rock, blues, psychedelic rock, art rock, soft rock, yacht rock, glam rock, folk rock. Take Fairport Convention as an example. All right, so here's my second reason why. Here's the analogy. So I'm giving a few analogies here. Back in the day, I would have my car set to different radio stations. One would be the classic rock channel. Another one would be like a yacht rock. One would be like an oldies channel because I like some of that stuff. And then lo and behold, one day, I guess I'm in my late 20s or early 30s. Lo and behold, I'm listening to the oldies channel with my dad in the car, bringing him somewhere. And Led Zeppelin's Whole Lotta Love comes on. And I thought, that's not oldies. You're saying that anything, once it becomes old, define old, now it can go in that category. I thought oldies was a metaphor for a certain period, and that's how I see that. So when I think of oldies, I think of Jerry Lee Lewis, Chuck Berry, Little Richard, the pioneers of rock and roll, if you will. That Elvis Presley comes to mind. So that's some of the R&B stuff that has that rock tinge to it. Bobby Blue Bland, B.B. King, Robert Johnson, all that stuff, right? Excuse me. Sorry if I left someone out. There's so many of those great African-American rock musicians who were the pioneers and inventors of rock music. If you do your research, you'll find that not Jerry Lee Lewis, Bill Haley and the Comets, that was not the first rock song. Anyway, but that's a topic for another discussion, another day. So Led Zeppelin as an oldies just does not jive with me. Another example, when we talk about classic music, people want to lump in Baroque music with classical music. But if you talk to a music professor at the university, they will tell you that that's not true. Baroque is often lumped in with classical. As I said, however, the classical period falls in between Baroque and the Romantic period. Classical music has a lighter, clearer texture than Baroque. They're similar, but they're not the same. So that's the thing. So if you take something like doom metal or post-punk or grunge or indie or art punk or all these other things that I mentioned, or doom metal, while they're similar, they're not close enough to be considered classic rock. In the same vein, Baroque is not classical music. All right. Another example. As an English teacher, I teach my students, especially seniors, the different periods of literature, because in that class we walk through all of the periods, or try to walk through all the periods for the school year, as opposed to we don't get all those periods in underclassmen. So here they are. The classical age, that's Greece and Rome. The medieval period, the Renaissance, think Shakespeare, right? The neoclassical period, also known as the Age of Enlightenment or the Age of Reason. The Restoration period, think Paradise Lost, John Milton. The Romantic period, Byron, Shelley, Keats, etc. The Victorian age, the modern age, the modern period, the postmodern period, and then currently we're in what's called the contemporary period of literature. So while you may have some similarities in the Restoration to the neoclassical, it gets its own period. So that's part of my way of thinking. And here's a better example. Think of classic vintage cars. And I'm going there. I'm going someplace with this, so keep in mind. I'm going to connect the dots in a minute. So I just had a quick brain bubble for a second. So think about classic vintage cars, and I used to be an amateur mechanic, so I discovered that, and I've had some classic vintage cars in my day, or some that would have been before they were destroyed by various hurricanes, but I had a 1970 Chevelle, and by today's standards, that would be considered a classic car or an antique or something that's vintage. And if you keep the car long enough, you can apply for an antique license plate, and it says antique on the license plate. I ended up wrecking that car, and so it never made it to that. My 1981 Camaro got destroyed by Hurricane Katrina. I was getting close to that or closer to that, so that never made its way. And so based on the rules, what makes a car an antique is it has to be X number of years long. So you're telling me, well, I drive a 2008 Hyundai Elantra. So you're telling me if you drive something in that era, or even a 2023 Hyundai Elantra or Camry or whatever, you're telling me that one day that will be considered a classic car or a vintage car or an antique? That does not jive with me either. Give me a break, really? I just don't see that. Yeah, these cars are well made and most of them, right, produced and that sort of thing. But they don't have the same specialness of a 1970 Boss Mustang or which has a 496 engine in, if I'm not mistaken, or the 396 heavy Chevy Chevelle, or the Chevelle that had the 454 in it, or the Mopar era of Dodge with those early Challengers and Chargers, right, and others, those great cars. 1969 Camaro. So it has to me, something to be classic has to be special in its own right. Now, again, what I'm saying is that it's a special time period. Not anything or anyone can eventually be lumped in together. That, to me, doesn't make sense. It's the same problem we have with the new wave of British heavy metal. That's an era. That's a time period, not a genre, because Motorhead sounds nothing like, if you want to include some debate, Motorhead. Let's pick another example. A Saxon has a totally different feel than Praying Mantis. And those two have a totally different feel than, say, Diamond Head or Budgie. If you want to lump them, they may be a little early. So that kind of notion. So again, new wave of British heavy metal is a time period or an era, not a genre. Again, same comparison, too many different subgenres. All right, now here is when I think the classic rock era begins and ends, and I'm going to have a asterisk next to the year it ends, but included. And I'll give examples of albums from those years. I think the classic rock era begins in 1966 with the following examples: the Beatles' Revolver, the Rolling Stones' Aftermath, Fresh Cream by Cream, A Quick One by The Who, Rubber Soul Beatles, Blues Breakers, Jefferson Airplane Takes Off, Pet Sounds, The Beach Boys. And I think it ends 1981. Now, I have an asterisk next to that, and I'll give you a date where maybe a better example. 1981, you get Moving Pictures, Tattoo You, For Those About to Rock, We Salute You, Escape from Journey, Paradise Theater from Styx, Time from ELO, Fair Warning from Van Halen, Fire of Unknown Origin from Blue Oyster Cult, and Foreigner 4. Okay, for me, that's a year I consider as when classic rock era ends. Here's why. 1982, the textures are starting to be different. Avalon, Roxy Music. Nebraska, Bruce Springsteen. Thriller, Michael Jackson. That's R&B, but I'm including it. It gives the vibe of the period, right? Rio from Duran Duran. Combat Rock from The Clash. Screaming for Vengeance, Judas Priest. That's heavy metal. That's not classic rock to me. Blue Mask from Lou Reed, going into a more artsy period in rock in some ways, right? Signals from Rush, American Fool, John Cougar Mellencamp, Diver Down from Van Halen. There's a falling off in greatness here. Some of these albums I mentioned are good, but compared to what comes before, in my opinion, they don't have. But regardless of excellent or very good, it's just the overall textures and sounds here are not the same. However, if we want to include 1982 as not the end of the classic rock era, here's where I think it ends, 1986. Perhaps a better list of why. Okay. Graceland, So, that's Peter Gabriel. Invisible Touch, Genesis. Look What the Cat Dragged In, Poison. Third Stage from Boston. A Kind of Magic from Queen. Back in the High Life. So we have a solo album from Steve Winwood, far removed to the sound he had in Traffic. The Bridge, that's Billy Joel. Slippery When Wet, Bon Jovi. Master of Puppets, that's not classic rock to me. I like it, it's not classic rock. Blah, 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 Iggy Pop. Life's Rich Pageant, REM. Dirty Work, Rolling Stones. Chicago 18. Eat 'Em and Smile, David Lee Roth. Somewhere in Time, Iron Maiden. Peace Sells But Who's Buying, Megadeth. Dancing Undercover, that's Rat. Turbo, Judas Priest. And Express by Love and Rockets. Now, anything else do I want to add? Yes. So, here's another line of reasoning. Most people will agree, if we take Rush for example, this is classic rock. Maybe at its finest. Or one of its finest, excuse me. How on earth, I like this, but how on earth is this classic rock? I don't think so. Too new wavy, Police sounding. I like it, it's good. It's not excellent, just my opinion. So this is way too far removed from this. So there you have it, everybody. I think that classic rock is a time period, an era, and not a genre for the reasons that I've given. Let me review. There's just too many subgenres to have it lumped as one period. The notion that anything become oldie, that anything become a classic car, anything can become an antique, vintage, anything can become a classic rock. Baroque is a classical type of music when it's not. That you're lumping everything together instead of doing the literary route. There's a period here, there's a period there, that sort of thing. So that's my line of reasoning. And again, I don't necessarily have a definitive, in my opinion. There is no definitive after all, but I can't even hold down what I think is the ending of the classic rock era. From my logic, I think it definitely is in 1966. You might be able to go to 1965, but I'm not seeing a list of that push as much as I do in 1966. Some will argue 67, 68. I'm going to say 1966. Again, it's just an opinion. No definitiveness here. 1981 can work as the ending. I still think you got, as those things that I read, those examples, Tattoo, etc., Moving Pictures Time, Fair Warning, you still have that overall feel, that vibe, that mood, that specialness, that texture, right? And then in 1982, there's kind of a falling off, but if not, I would definitely argue that 1986 is the end of the classic rock era. I don't include grunge. I know some people do. Again, just my opinion. So nothing here am I saying is right. It's just my opinion. So again, once again, I think that the classic rock era begins in 1966 and ends at the latest 1986. So 20 years or 21 years. Anyway, have a blessed day. Don't forget to post in the comments your thoughts. I can't wait to hear what you have to think. Thank you so much. Bye.